Hello and welcome to Good Game, the show for gamers by gamers. I'm Bajo.
I'm Junglist.
This week, we infinitely unleash our undiscovery with force.
Huh?
Reviews, Jung, reviews. Plus, it's Steven Spielpants as I unleash my infinite talents as a machinima maker and get some tips from the creator of Red vs. Blue.
We'll force you to rediscover the joy that were these in our backwards compatible About Game & Watch. But first, can you guess the game for this week?
Now let me unleash the news.
Force off.
Good game.
First, a quick update on the story we brought you last week concerning Square Enix's move to acquire fellow Japanese publisher Tecmo. Tecmo, the creator of the Ninja Gaiden series, has rejected the advances of Square Enix and instead announced it is courting a merger with yet another Japanese publisher, Koei. Koei are responsible for the Dynasty Warriors series. We'll have more news as this develops, perhaps even next week. Joss Whedon's Buffy the Vampire Slayer is to be developed as a massively multiplayer online game. The Buffy MMO is in the works at Multiverse and will form part of Multiverse Places, their upcoming proprietary social network. Multiverse hopes the Buffy MMO will be playable as a fully immersive 3D environment or as a Flash-based 2D game where both types of players can interact.
You look like a vampire and you smell like one too.
Multiverse had previously announced plans to make an MMO of another Whedon property, the cancelled sci-fi series Firefly, but it appears Buffy will now take precedence.
Good game.
Japan is a crazy place. They have vending machines that sell underpants, game shows based on pain and embarrassment, and we're used to seeing some pretty crazy games from them too. But how much of the flaws in these games are based on Japanese preference for games and genuine mistakes by the designer?
I shall avenge my comrades with this blade.
Infinite Undiscovery for Xbox 360 is the latest Japanese role-playing game from Tri-Ace, makers of Star Ocean. Tri-Ace brings all the traditional turn-based RPG conventions to real time. They've been doing it for a while now and they're getting pretty good at it. There's no random encounters here. Skill will play a much larger part in your quest.
The title kind of suggests you'll be discovering nothing forever. It's meant to mean you'll be discovering the unknown infinitely. Supposedly, any of your actions can affect future encounters and numerous discoveries. This has been completely blown out of proportion. Don't believe the hype. It's scripted from start to finish.
Well, that's not entirely true. There are some random enemies and items. But you know, there's nothing wrong with a linear game as long as it's good.
But if you think this is some kind of world simulator, you're wrong. In fact, if you played it through a second time, you would be undiscovering the same stuff again.
But it doesn't stop the story from being pretty cool. A group known as the Order of Chains are dragging the moon closer to the Earth to harness its mystical power. Those born with an immunity to the lunar power, known as the Unblessed, were once seen as pariahs, but now they're the only hope.
You'll play as Capel, an Unblessed, with a striking resemblance to the inspirational Lord Sigmund. Not only is Lord Sigmund the leader of the resistance force, he's the only known hero that can break the chains. What could have been a great story is ruined by some atrocious dialogue.
Run! Okay, thanks.
Oh, nothing. I didn't mean to say anything. I didn't say anything. Don't mind me, really. Please try this dish. It's really good.
Cutscenes are pretty beautiful with a mute button. You'll want to turn it up later though for some fantastic music from Motoi Sakuraba, easily the best part of the game.
Combat is where it succeeds as a true blend of RPG and action. Auto-targeting works perfectly, and although boss battles are little more than here's a boss, kill it, there's lots of abilities and items so you can infinitely unexperiment.
Eventually you'll have so many characters you'll have to set up multiple parties. In certain areas you'll assign different objectives to teams and it becomes a bit like a single-player raid party. The AI is smart enough to handle this and everyone just kind of does their own thing from healing to damage.
Graphically, there's a slowdown in these large fights, but I think you agree, Jung, they're just plain fun.
Absolutely. You know, it's a lot more fun storming a castle with 12 people than it is 4, I'll say that. Connect abilities allow you to use your squad mates' abilities as well as yours at the same time, making it fast and easy to combine the abilities. Safe to say they got this part of the game right.
The same can't be said for the puzzles, which are often solved for you. Case in point, take a look at this.
What? Watch out!
It seemed as though when Capel started to play the flute, we could all see it. Is that right?
Magic flute, I know what to do. Why deny me the pleasure of solving the puzzle myself?
Other times you're given no information when it's needed. Like when you're dumped into the middle of an area with no directions and you have to trace around the edges of the map just to figure out where to go, and you can spend ages lost like this.
Well, it's perception. You say lost, others would call it exploring.
Well, I don't perceive that as good game design. It's like if I told you to go to Bob's house. I'm not going to tell you where it is or how to get there. You're just going to have to go out and knock on doors until you trigger a cutscene.
Oh, could you gather some wood for the fire?
In fact, a lot of time is wasted undiscovering. Pointless missions such as escort quests and collecting 10 piles of firewood ensure that the playtime is infinite, and missing one of the game's save points can cost you over an hour of progress.
It's possible save points were lacking for technical reasons. As it stands, it takes a long time to save in this game, but you got to expect that from these types of games.
If you're going to have dodgy save points like this, you alienate everyone but the hardcore, and you force your audience to work around your game design. And this is where we have to draw the line and stop saying, those quirky Japanese, and start saying, sorry fella, that's just bad.
The second half of the game is definitely better than the first, which is backwards, but it should still be acknowledged.
And it's kind of trendy these days to like these Japanese games. You know, the whole Japanese thing, just like anime. Like if you remember that game, No More Heroes, which intentionally explored different player experiences, which really meant that half of the game was intentionally bad, but some people liked that. They thought it was great.
But at least that was doing something different. Square Enix have been pumping these out for a while now with the same characters and the same dialogue and the same story. It's almost like it's a Hollywood formula.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, I like both traditional and modern JRPGs, both Lost Odyssey and The World Ends With You rated well on Good Game. And with Microsoft's lust for the Japanese market, there's no shortage of JRPGs on the 360 now. Let's wrap it up though, shall we?
At its best, you'll be romping through the wilderness with a sizable force, taking on anything and everything to a great soundtrack. I'm giving it 7.5 out of 10 rubber chickens.
At its worst, you'll be cringing at the painful dialogue, fumbling around towns for a cutscene, and tracing the edges of the map in a frustrating waste of time. I'm giving it 6 out of 10 rubber chickens.
Good game!
Machinima, a mashup of machine and cinema. It's the art of taking a game, putting your own story to it, and then showing it to the world. During our last break, I decided to write some scripts, do some storyboards, make a shot list, and have a crack at some myself. I got a bunch of consoles together, a few copies of Grand Theft Auto 4, booted up a temperamental capture beast PC, which we like to call Behemoth, and roped in some friends to help. After hours of editing, we finally had our very own short film. And it sucked. From day one on the set, tempers were frayed. Actors weren't hitting their marks. We kept losing sunlight, and every now and then, someone would drop a grenade in the middle of a scene. Despite these and other technical problems of trying to capture in HD, we finally managed to shamble together something that at least had a few explosions, but it wasn't anywhere near as good as I'd hoped for.
Someone is trying to kill me.
Well, dude, that really sucks. Who would try and do that?
Later. Maybe one day.
So, I decided to get some much needed advice by asking Bernie Burns, the creator of Red vs. Blue, how he got started.
Well, it started back in the days before Xbox Live, and I'm a big Xbox player. And you had to take your Xboxes and physically drag them over to other people's houses and have LAN parties. And so it kind of spawned from being together at like 3 in the morning on somebody's couch with 5 Xboxes in the room and 5 TVs and people just yelling back and forth. And eventually that yelling back and forth just became Red vs. Blue, where we just took our yelling and put it over the video game.
Dude, are you kidding? We finally have 2 girls on our team. You know what that means? Yeah, co-ed softball team.
I found Machinima was pretty much like making a real movie, and you've said before that you use bullet holes for eye lines.
Yeah, if we have to have a guy match an eye line too, we'll like have him shoot a hole in the wall and he looks from this bullet hole to that bullet hole and we know it's right, you know, because he has his own view of what he's looking at.
Do you remember a particular shot or scene that you just did a whole stack of takes on?
they're ones you wouldn't even remember. Like the stuff where like a Jeep blows up and it looks fabulous or flips on top of the base, that's what the game is designed to do. The hard stuff is like when you have a group of 5 people and they all turn to look at something that happens, having them all match their eye lines, you know, that's not part of a game. Who wants to play the everyone look the same direction game, you know? So that stuff is really hard to pull off. Because you're like, okay, everybody, nope, this guy's looking over here, let's go again. And we did like sometimes 40 or 50 takes to make everybody look in the same direction.
So can you actually make a living out of this? And are you even allowed to?
We've been fortunate that we got in at a point in history when we could just describe to them what we wanted to do and it sounded safe. And then after that, we built enough reputation with Red vs. Blue where other video game companies approached us. Microsoft put out actual rules where you can make machinima based on their games, certain games. You go read the rules online, and then they even give you the stipulation where you can generate some revenue from it up to a certain level. I hope more companies will do that. It'll make it a lot clearer. And so it's not, you don't get in a situation where somebody spends hours making something and then the developer has to tell them to take it down. It's embarrassing for the developer. It looks like they're, going backwards against their fans, and nobody wants that kind of scenario. So always better do a little bit of legal research before you get started.
I think it looks more like a puma.
What in Sam hell is a puma?
You mean like the shoe company? No, like a puma. It's a big cat.
Frank Delario is a producer, director, and cinematographer with 20 years' experience in filmmaking.
I produce Machinima, so I'm the producer for the Clan, which is a 4-man team now.
Do you find that the appeal of Machinima is spreading outside of the gaming community?
I think it's going to get bigger. I think it's going to take a while. I mean, we've been doing this for 10 years, knowing not exactly from the beginning, but fairly early on, we got a sense that, you know what, this is definitely an animation process that is going to catch on. And not, sometimes people talk about it, well, is it art or whatever? I'm like, I don't know. It's just a technique to produce animation. Compared to traditional 3D CGI animation, we can produce 3 times faster at a 1/5 the cost.
Grand Theft Auto 4 was quite a hard game to use for Machinima because there were no inbuilt tools in the game to make it easier. Looking to the future, the next big game that could do this very well is Little Big Planet. We asked Siobhan Reddy, an executive producer on the game, if they thought about the Machinima community right from the start.
Not necessarily that community to start with, but certainly we do think about them now. And the whole idea of acting and communicating with the character, like I could actually spend ages getting my character dressed, getting another one dressed in like some lovely costume, and then I spend ages just tilting their heads and doing it's just there's so much fun in that I can totally understand why the Machinima community would get really excited about it. So hopefully we'll have some good stuff for them at some point.
I guess what I learnt from all this was to have a good script first, be prepared to spend a lot more time than you'd expect making the film, and to make sure you choose friends that can take direction.
There are grenades in the scene!
Just give it a shot, Just come up with a simple concept and see how efficient this thing can be, this method can be to produce videos. And then if you actually want to start doing something and you want to do it for a living or build an audience, my only piece of advice, and this is more with internet content in general, is just be consistent. Meaning always have something new to put out. Don't put out a 30-minute piece and then wait 6 months and put out another 30-minute piece. If you want to build an audience, take that 30-minute piece and break it up in little chunks so that people know to come back on a regular basis.
Now, I'm not really encouraging it, but if you'd like to see my attempt at Machinima, it's there in full in the gallery section of our website.
Good game! Time now to check on the team working on the Good Game game Office Wars, who have been making some important decisions.
Thanks for coming along, guys, and thanks for squeezing so many people into this tiny little space. Pre-production is pretty much done. We are just about to move on to the production phase of the game. So we've got a few things to look at that have come in from the ABC, from the website. We'll start with some logos. Zach in particular has been coming up with a short list for us of some of the best ones. What do we like? Any thoughts? I think the Jack in the Box one's pretty cool. It says Jester's hat, which is kind of comical. Looks a little bit corporate at the same time.
I like the idea of sort of the tentacles or whatever they are sort of jumping at as well, kind of outside the box. it sort of says everything we want it to say, and it was nice and clean and crisp.
Right, so we're getting a bit of consensus on the Robots in a Box Wagglemax logo here. Everyone likes that?
Yep. Yeah, it's good.
Okay, that one's a done deal.
We have
Is that it?
characters to look at. Tim has a piece of paper with all the characters.
Me and Zach like the one submitted by Purple Puppy, mostly because they're, I assume it's a girl, explains really well visually what they look like. So as soon as I showed them to Zach, he sort of knew, oh, I know exactly what I'm supposed to sort of draw.
All right, so what we're taking away today, we've got the logo sorted out, and we're liking some of these characters. I'll leave that to you guys during the week to pick those out of that list. But the Purple Puppy ones, they get in the thumbs up. That's looking good. I think we got a lot out of that. Thanks very much, guys. We'll get back to work.
So congratulations to Gova, Mistaken and Purple Puppy, whose work will be included in the game and whose names will be appearing in the credits, and to everyone who contributed to Office Wars.
We'll be making regular trips to Melbourne over the coming weeks to check on the team as they work towards getting a playable demo ready for November.
May the Force be with them.
Good game!
Before the Wii, before the Game Boy, and even before the NES, Nintendo was already making innovative game machines, just like this one. It's called the Game & Watch, and if you've been playing games for long enough, then the chances are you had your first introduction to the world of Nintendo courtesy of one of these babies. First released in 1980, the Game & Watch was the brainchild of visionary inventor and toy designer Gunpei Yokoi. As legend has it, Yokoi was commuting home from the office by train when he spied a bored businessman passing the time by pressing buttons on an LCD screen calculator. Yokoi combined the concept of an LCD screen and a few buttons with what Nintendo did best, making games. And the Game & Watch was born. And if you're wondering where the watch part of the name comes in, they also included a digital clock. The first model of Game & Watch consoles were these ones, and they were nicknamed the Silver Series because of the colour of their metal faceplates. This particular game is called Fire, and it had you rescuing people as they leapt from the windows of a burning building. You had to use a safety net to bounce them into the back of an ambulance, which of course scored you big points. The technical limitations of early 1980s liquid crystal displays meant that Game & Watch units like Fire had to be extremely simple in design. That little Game & Watch guy couldn't just run around the screen freely, and instead all of his animations were pre-printed into the LCD screen. It may look kind of clunky today, but in 1980 this was about as cutting edge as game technology could get. The next evolution in Game & Watch design was a slight one. Nintendo basically made the screen wider and used a lot of imagination when they named these new models the widescreen series. One of the most fun and best known of these widescreen games was Octopus, a game that had you attempting to loot a chest full of sunken treasure guarded by a giant octopus who wasn't keen on sharing his riches with you. There were plenty of other games in the widescreen format too, including such varied titles as Snoopy's Tennis, based on the comic strip Pooch, and Fire Attack, a game that saw you protecting an American Civil War era fort against a band of fire-starting Indians. The widescreen series would prove popular, and was produced from 1981 into the early 90s. But the most popular of all of the Game & Watch models were these, the multi-screen series. They were appropriately named because they had two screens, and the gameplay was spread out over both. The one I'm holding here is Donkey Kong, and it was without doubt the best known and most popular of all the Game & Watch units. The gameplay was based loosely on the arcade game, with a tiny liquid crystal Mario having to leap over barrels thrown at him by the great ape himself, with the ultimate goal being to climb to the highest rung so he could knock Kong off his girder and get the girl. After the launch of the multi-screen Donkey Kong in 1982, sales of Game & Watch units went through the roof, and over the next few years, Nintendo would dabble in a bit of gambling with a multi-screen version of Blackjack, and even made an LCD version of The Legend of Zelda, among many others. After the success of having two screens at once, Nintendo moved on to the next logical progression, having two players at once. With the release of the Microversus system in 1984, you can now play games like Donkey Kong 3 on the move, only this time you could let a friend join in.
I am a friend. Can I join in?
The screen was a lot wider than any other Game & Watch, and the body of the Microversus units opened up to reveal two paddles with retractable cords. It was really a genius piece of design for the early 80s. The actual Microversus games weren't quite as fun as the multi-screen ones, but they did at least give you the satisfaction of being able to pawn your mates like the noobs they were, even when you were away from home.
Hacks!
In recent years, Nintendo have released compilations of Game & Watch games, complete with updated variants in the Game & Watch Gallery series for the Game Boy Advance. Even more recently, the design of the famous multi-screened Game & Watch was used as the basis for the touchscreened DS console, one of the highest-selling consoles of all time. Meanwhile, original Game & Watch units are considered prized possessions by video game collectors and will probably climb over their grandmothers to get their hands on just a few of the treasures we've got here today. And with the interest in these miniature machines enduring for well over 25 years, the Game & Watch is unquestionably one of the most important developments in gaming history.
Good game! As you may have heard in our backwards compatibility last week, there have been a lot of Star Wars games. Some good, some not so much. Being big Star Wars fans ourselves, we're gonna do our best not to reveal any spoilers here, but you have been spoil-warned.
The Force Unleashed on Xbox 360 and PS3 aims to bridge the gap between the fantastic original movies and those other ones by filling in the blanks and creating some new ones on just how the extermination of the Jedi came about.
On a routine Jedi hunt, Vader discovers a boy with extraordinary powers. He pushes the dark side to the extreme and trains his dark apprentice with plans to do great things.
Dark side is your ally.
The story twists and turns as you're sent on missions to assassinate Jedi Masters, and this means taking out witnesses, even if they're on your own team. There's lots and lots of stormtroopers, variations of stormtroopers, and other classic Star Wars characters to fling into wars, and generally puppeteer into oblivion. And it's all really fun. New costumes and abilities are unlocked along the way, and some areas have intelligent combinations of enemies which make it pretty tough to penetrate.
As far as the story goes, things get a bit predictable as the young apprentice struggles with his conscience. But LucasArts have done a great job of capturing the look, sound, and feel of these iconic settings and characters. In fact, on more than one occasion, the cutscenes remind you of key moments in the film.
Deal with the boy.
And it's good to see that there are stormtroopers that can actually fire their weapons accurately. It's kind of a rare thing in Star Wars games in my experience. My only real gripe with the game is Vader's voice. Apparently it's voiced by Matt Sloan, who's a famous internet celebrity for creating the very funny Chad Vader. And it's not bad, but it's no James Earl Jones.
He's attacking a critical Imperial shipyard.
Yeah, it really does take you out of the moment, doesn't it? Did you know that James Earl Jones took acting lessons to get over his stutter?
No ways. Back on topic though, Jung. All of the characters have been captured well, and it's good that this has happened because you have to stay so true to fans when you're making a game like this. The saber animations look especially awesome, and it's really fun trying to work out the weaknesses and strengths of the bosses so you can actually take them down.
You can see hints of a good combat system in the boss fights, but more often it's about getting a few lucky shots in where you can and taking advantage of certain moments. When you're dueling a Jedi on a ship that's plummeting to Earth with the classic familiar music playing, it's hard not to get excited.
For a game that delves into the dark side so much, I can't help but think the M rating holds it back a little.
The lightsabers should dismember badge. It's a standard Star Wars thing, but you don't see it too often in Star Wars games. Quick-time events are more prevalent with bosses, and there's some mini-games when you get locked into a force struggle. But as we see often in these games with the obligatory quick-time mechanic, it doesn't let you enjoy the action on successful execution. There was so much potential for some interesting and fun puzzles here as well, but we didn't see it. The most complex thing you'll see is turn this lock or blast this door.
There are two new technologies at work here, DMM and Euphoria. Earlier in the year, we caught up with Dan Wasson, one of the producers on the game, and asked him a bit about it and what it was like working with Aussie developer Chrome, who worked on the PS2, PSP, and Wii versions.
Well, that's probably the craziest part of this whole project. You've got Euphoria, which is a piece of middleware that imbues the characters with a digital nervous system, so they have realistic animations and they ragdoll and they move like you would expect, and they also have this kind of brain which is about self-preservation. So if you throw somebody at something, he might duck, and we didn't build that to script to have him duck. He's judging, here comes a flying thing, I'm gonna try to get out of the way. Sometimes they screw up, they're too slow, and they get knocked out or taken out. So it's always different, right? So that's one piece. And then there's digital molecular matter, which is imbues the objects and materials, or the objects in the world, with different properties. So wood splinters like wood, glass shatters like glass.
What was it like working with Chrome?
Well, it's cool. They really helped, I think, all of us see what this game could be because they already had the engine up and running. And In a lot of cases, we were able to build things sooner than you might have found on the 360 or PS3, so we saw it in action. We knew it was fun to throw a guy into a wall or to smash through things or to build these big combos. So they were able to drive a lot of these gameplay ideas, and so it was a good collaboration.
This technology has been a big selling point for the game wherever it's been previewed, and you can see it in action wherever a stormtrooper ducks for cover or tries to hold onto objects as you fling them around. But honestly, we expected a lot more.
Yeah, Jung, I was expecting this incredibly flexible world with spectacular interaction, and what we got was great and a really good-looking, make-your-own-fun kind of game, but it wasn't really groundbreaking.
Red barrels are...
I think you'll find they're called Imperial Space Barrels, Jung.
Okay then, Badge. Imperial Space Barrels are intrusively everywhere, and on the few occasions that you do get to grab a TIE fighter mid-flight, it's usually not worth it. They're obviously set on repeat and on the same flight path, and it's quite hard to hit them.
I don't know, Jung. I used to bullseye womp rats in my T-16 back home. It's not so hard.
Right. Well, we didn't really get the game that we were waiting for, did we, Badge? But what we got was still good, and it's awesome fun blasting around enemies and objects with the Force, no matter how you look at it. I'm giving it 8.5 rubber chickens out of 10.
It's definitely one of the best Star Wars games I've ever played, Jung. I'm giving it 8.5 as well. And it was great to see Jar Jar Binks and Frozen Carbonite. So, did you guess the game for this week?
It was Star Ocean, released in 1996 for the Super Famicom. Set in space, it featured real-time combat and a clever item creation system. It was also the first game from Infinite Undiscovery developers Tri-Ace.
And if you got that one right, give yourself a big pat on the back because the game was never released outside of Japan, although some subsequent Star Ocean games were.
With a new one due out next year, apparently.
On PS3, plus some ports going to PSP, and time for us to say goodbye once again, Junglist.
Next week, we're all about a sunburnt country as we meet the Aussie developer behind the game, kicking up a bit of a fuss worldwide to Blob.
In Backwards Compatible, we'll be charting the history of Aussie game development, from the 80s and the immensely successful The Hobbit to present day. And we'll be looking at just what it takes to land that dream job in the industry.
We'll be releasing the WAH in the only MMO that has dedicated Australian servers, Warhammer Age of Reckoning.
Next week, we're back at our usual time on ABC2, so until then, gamers, Jung, let's sing. I've played on consoles that never shut down, from Sydney to Melbourne and old Hobart Town. But no matter how far or how wide I own, I still call the den of gaming home. That was a bit silly.